G'day everyone, I'm Emerson, I'm from Melbourne, Australia. Very interesting to listen to Bing Bing. Australia's got a population of 23 mil. Beijing as a city's got 21 mil. A couple of other things is really Melbourne's only been around for about 150 years, States for centuries, UK for many centuries, Beijing for ever. So we're a very young country, extremely young country. At RMIT, it was interesting when I first started, about 85% of our cohort of students had a textile technology, were doing a textile technology course. Unfortunately this year will be the last year of textile technology at RMIT in Melbourne. I'm running off the final 6 students. All our students now are either doing fashion design or fashion business, fashion merchandising. One of the buildings which the group's going to see where my office is, that used to be an old textiles mill. And when I was first there was spinning machines absolutely everywhere. Today it's just full of computers. So it's a very changing world. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to talk about a little bit more about the history of the Australian fashion industry and then bring it up to today. I'm going to talk about some of the issues that the Australian fashion industry is having to deal with. And then I'm going to finish off with some research. And I'm going to take it a little bit different. I'm not going to consider it from the consumer point of view and their practice of purchasing and buying and how they're being drawn into overconsumption. But I'm going to talk about some research I've been doing on the opinions and attitudes of our industry about what they're doing in terms of sustainability. Let's be truthful, Australia is a bit of a backwater. We were fashion adopters, we weren't creators. We basically just followed what was happening in Europe and we're always one season behind because of the different climatic regions. It did start to change in the 60s and 70s where Australia tried to start to develop its own identity. There is really only 2 key hubs in Australia, and that's Sydney and Melbourne, although Brisbane and Adelaide and Perth are starting to develop, but really these are the 2 main cluster centres. If you look at Melbourne, 4.5 million, Sydney 5 million, they're quite large cities. Melbourne had a very strong manufacturing base, but that has basically disappeared. We have seen the demise of manufacturing, and it's exactly the same as what's happened in the UK and in the USA. And indeed, all first world countries have gone through the same experience. For those doing supply chain logistics, you've heard of the flying geese theory. Well, that's exactly what's happened, moving to manufacturing to low cost. China has been one of our major suppliers. Also India, the subcontinent. Interestingly though, RMIT, although we're closing textile technology down in Melbourne, we actually operate textile technology in Sri Lanka with a Brandex organisation. And when I was last there last year to review our program, they're actually starting to transfer their manufacturing to Bangladesh because they're starting to raise their economic levels. Once again, the flying geese theory is on the move again. So today, we have an open market in Australia, minimal barrier protection. I think in 2015, 5% tariffs. Very small manufacturing base. It is more towards niche markets and technical textiles. We networked into Asian supply chains, as what has been the case with the USA and the UK. The workforce has been very interesting. As I was talking to you about our cohorts at RMIT, the whole industry has changed. There is a lot of house brands It's become very design orientated, and in fact merchandise students are the number one group of employees, doing all the product development work, doing all of the analysis, and dealing with our overseas supply chains. Typical type supply chain. What we're finding here is that the local designers, the small businesses, they're becoming, they used to work in communities closely with their local manufacturers and suppliers, but now it's just all over the place. It's global. I'm going to go into a little bit more in depth about the actual retail scene in Australia, and I think you'll find that it's probably identical to what's here in the UK. We'll start off the mass volume market. And we've got all the major mass volume stores in Australia, in particular in Melbourne and Sydney. We have our own little success stories, Cotton On. They're pretty large now and they're quite global, especially they're starting to take off in the States. In the middle market, these are all the local brands that operate. They're having a lot of trouble at the moment. Quite a few are starting to close down. The mass markets are absolutely killing them at the moment, and also digital. We have a major department store duopoly in terms of Myer and David Jones. Household names back home, but probably not here. The premier designer market. Very interesting new market which has occurred over the last 10 to 15 years. Lots of niche, very, what can I call it? Very dynamic. These designers are becoming have embraced the global market, and indeed they're premium bespoke. Innovative in retail, but they represent over 85% of the market. They're really, really growing in Australia, our small business. This is the growth area of Australia, but they have their issues. As with the supply chains, where it's become very segmented, they're not really working together as a group very well. The government needs to do something about incubation. Industry associations need to get them together to get some economies going and get a general theme going. But it is a very, very exciting market that's happening out there. The luxury market, exactly the same as what's in the USA, probably in China as well. They're all there. They all have their shops hovering around the major tourist retail zones. Overall, you can see the stats there on the Australian fashion industry. If I was to compare that to the UK and the US in terms of percentages to population, they're basically identical. The only thing which is a little bit different, we're a little bit higher on online sales, which is 11% of total retail sales. And ASOS and Net-a-Porter have confirmed that we are their third largest market worldwide, with only a population of 23 million. So it indicates we're a little bit tech savvy at the moment, or we trust the internet a little bit more. Today's issues in terms of to remain sustainable in business, we have the digital trends in fashion retail, global and digital competition, fast fashion, and we have supply and waste issues. All the customer is evolving. Online shopping trends are increasing, and they are driving, or they are the drivers, can be the drivers of behavioural change, and I'll talk a little bit more about that later. Multi-channeling, the store is changing. We saw that yesterday with the presentations. There's M-commerce, F-commerce, Facebook, it's all happening. And this is where I have a concern. Remember the previous slide where I spoke about the 85% representation within the industry. They're small businesses. I don't know how they can cope with this. I don't know how they can have the time or pay some people to actually engage with these trends. And they do need assistance. And this is what they have to compete with. They've got all the tools, they can do all of this. I'm going to talk a little bit about fast fashion now. The Rana Plaza, I'll keep that up for a minute. It was a bit of a wake-up call for a lot of our mass producers in Australia. To be a little bit cynical, I noticed when I looked on a couple of websites, Kmart being one, their policy on suppliers suddenly came up onto their website 2 weeks after this occurred. It was a pretty weak response, I thought, but they'll trying to show that they are corporate social responsible companies. To me, it is a big issue. I don't think industry has a full understanding of where they're at. So this leads me on to the research. It gave me the motivation to start looking at what is the Australian industry themselves, what is their practice on sustainability. And I was looking at 3 objectives: their awareness of sustainability principles or theory, their planned response to sustainability, and do they have any evidence of a planned sustainability response. In this research, just give you some methodology, we did try to do an electronic survey with them with 435 companies, which is pretty big in Australia. We did get, I thought, a reasonable response rate of 22%, and the type of organisations ranged from medium, small, and to the larger department stores. So wholesalers, manufacturers and designers. So it's a pretty good spread, and I think it does give a reasonable understanding, or gives us reasonable confidence that the opinions that come out were fairly accurate. So the first thing was on the awareness of sustainable principles of theory. 84% were not aware of any literature whatsoever on sustainability. I found that absolutely damning. They were aware, 53% were aware of product life cycle analysis as a tool, but if you look at that, nearly half didn't. They don't look at it at all. They weren't aware of it. Theme 2, the planned response to sustainability. 88% of companies indicated that cost reduction was their main strategic issue. Sustainability cost drivers, less than 30% nominated the following: carbon reduction, water and energy. The study implied that all they were interested in was labour, low cost, overseas, Rana Plaza, and raw materials. They were the key important issues that they were looking at. So 63%, as came out, 63% indicated that raw material input costs being their main sustainability response. 56% indicated their sustainability strategy was driven by consumer demand. Now, I found that interesting. If it's driven by consumer demand, you'd think that sustainability issues were starting to have an impact. We've been having sustainability discussions with our students for over 10 years now, and it's interesting when we've conducted our focus groups, we grab our first year students, and the final year students will discuss sustainability issues with them. And we'll bring up horrific graphics of damage to the environment and show it to them and give them their thoughts of what they felt about sustainability. And they all felt it. They all said that they would love to buy sustainable goods, etc., etc. When we come to show them some brands and we asked them if they were buying from them, and these brands were generally the cause of our environmental issues, they said, yep, we buy them. And we asked them, why do you buy? And they say price and the brand name. They were not interested in their sustainable practices whatsoever when they buy. So we have an apathetic consumer out there, which is a grave concern, an apathetic consumer that we need to overcome. 29% indicated that product life cycle was not a primary factor for sustainable planning. 30% of the industries do not care where their product ends up. So, any evidence of a planned sustainability response? If there is, it's going to be consumer driven, according to the industry, 68%. Very less on government driven, 25%. The government does not do much in terms of supporting sustainability whatsoever. We've had some wonderful little things in there like greening the houses, etc., giving some subsidies, and also for reducing our carbon through solar panels, but that's about it. What we did then with this survey, we actually showed the survey results to some key industry leaders, and we conducted some interviews with them. 2 were CEOs of the 2 biggest companies in Australia, and 2 were from industry associations. And basically, when we showed them the results, they weren't surprised at all, especially the lack of knowledge of current literature and the product life cycle analysis. Their excuse is that competition and margin impacts were the key issues surrounding their sustainable strategy. Reducing inputs, raw materials, is normal business practice, as we all know. But they felt as though that was their sustainable response, was reducing the amount of input into it, but not looking at many other areas in terms of sustainability. What does this all mean? We have a paucity of knowledge in regards to sustainability, not only as a consumer, but within the industry. Guys, as the students, you all have been studying it, you know the issues, but it's not getting out there to the consumer. You're in a very important place at the moment. I've had graduates for the last 10 years, and they do not seem to be having a major impact on the culture of organisations within our industry. We've got to keep on selling the message. The talk on the fashion revolution, I think, is just absolutely fantastic, to try and highlight and raise awareness. But we've got to change business culture, and we've got to try and have consumers informed. The other thing which really surprised me, sustainability is actually being taught in our primary schools for the last 20 years and has been rolled through our secondary systems and obviously at university level, but it still is not having an impact of any significance. Just a little quote, getting close to finish. There are bad ways of producing garments and less bad ways. Let's see if we can find the less bad ways from Lucy. My next stage of my research is actually going to be looking at the graduate. I'm going to be looking at graduates of the programs that I'm involved with, the Bachelor of Fashion, and I'm going to see if they're still practicing sustainability. I'm going to still see if they still actually understand the literature or whether they've forgotten it. I'm also going to study whether the cultural organisation is actually dumbing them down. It'll be interesting to see what comes out of there. Hopefully it'll inform educationalists on curriculum design as well. Why do I have a motivation in this? I think Nick, where's Nick? Up there. You had a great photo when you were in Africa. You're with your mum and dad. My motivation is with my family. Beautiful bunch of kids. They're going to have kids themselves. It's a big issue, sustainability. I want everyone to have the same standard of life that we've got at the moment. But if we keep on going the way we are, we will start to go backwards. That's it for me.